Support for Carolina Business Review made possible by Sunoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and provider of packaging services, with more than 300 operations in 35 countries, headquartered in Hartsville since 1899. And by Business North Carolina Magazine. There's a place for those who subscribe to the theory that business doesn't have to be boring.
When it comes to banking and financial services, our current economic environment dictates that bigger isn't always better. From the Piedmont to the upstate, we look at the role of community banks and smaller investment groups. Hello and welcome to Carolina Business Review, your source for Carolina business and public policy. I'm Steve Crump in for Chris William. On this program, we'll hear from panelists from the Carolinas and learn more about the conditions they are coping with in a changing economic climate. Is it a case of survival of the fittest? And how do the little guys grow their client base? And later in the program, the president and CEO of Charlotte-based Autobell, Chuck Howard.
Major funding for Carolina Business Review provided by Grant Thornton, an international accounting, tax, and business advisory organization dedicated to serving middle market companies. Grant Thornton, a passion for the business of accounting. And by Novant Health, a not-for-profit group of hospitals and physician clinics, ranked as one of our nation's 10 best healthcare systems, caring for patients and communities in North and South Carolina. Major funding also by King & Spalding, an international law firm with over 800 lawyers in 13 offices worldwide, providing legal services to clients in the Carolinas and throughout the world. For more information, visit www.kslaw.com. This edition of Carolina Business Review was recorded May 13, 2011. On this week's program, Thom Smith of the Gate Cities Community Bank, Walter Todd of Greenwood Capital Associates, and special guest Chuck Howard, President and CEO of Autobell.
Hello and welcome to Carolina Business Review. Steve Crump in tonight for Chris William. And we want to begin with Thom Smith in the area of community banks. Banking obviously is kind of a very volatile industry. And, you know, we do this show in Charlotte, which is the headquarters of Bank of America. But we said at the outset, bigger isn't always better. And what's the niche that you're finding with community banks these days?
You know, Steve, what we're finding is that there's a lot of folks out there and that they're looking for a way to get a loan approved or just somebody to consult with them. And community banks fit that need. There's a lot of people that come in and we just sit down and look at their financials. And we're doing a lot of what I call loans that need to be redone, reworked, and that kind of thing.
In other words, what you're saying is, in many respects, it's about relationship.
That's exactly right.
You know, when you know a client, when you see somebody on an ongoing basis, it's almost like one of the credit, I guess, report commercials that we see. It's like you're not a number, you're a person with a life and a history.
That's correct. And, you know, this is my 37th year in the business, and I started with one of the larger institutions, and I've been in community banks for over 20 years, and I'm learning that the more I'm in it, the closer I stay to the customer, the better off we are, and that's what community banks do. From
Greenwood Capital, you guys are a similar story based in Greenwood, South Carolina. What are some of the comparisons that you guys make, simply because in a lot of regards, going back, you all have been at it for some 50 years, and even your ties go back to the textile industry, back when names like Milliken were, controlling South Carolina.
That's correct. We were the in-house investment department for a company called Greenwood Mills in Greenwood, South Carolina, hence our location and our name, and we were spun out in 1983 as an independent company. And similar to Thom's experience with community banks, I think what you find with investment firms is people want to be able to come in and sit down and look at you face to face and across the table and really understand who's making the decisions. And I think that level of service, particularly at the financial crisis that we went through, is very important.
What's the shared experience between the two of you guys? Simply because, you got people that are frustrated with the big boys, and it's like, hey, we need a better rate, we need more time, we need that kind of a relationship that we can't find elsewhere.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of overlap there in terms of the level of service. I mean, I think these bigger companies, can maybe have more depth of capital and so forth, but in terms of being able to spend the time with the clients, be able to pick up the phone and not dial a 1-800 number, and talk to the individual actually making the decisions on behalf of their loan or their investments, I think is just, is critically important to people, particularly after the unfortunate scams that we've had in the financial industry with Madoff and some others. I think people really want to know who they're dealing with.
And it perhaps sounds as though it's the question of who do you trust?
Exactly. I think one of the important things, and I tell folks, I met with a small business owner this morning, it's been around since the 60s, and what they want to do is build a trust relate. You're exactly right. So let me have your information, but more importantly, let's talk about where you've been, where you're going, and how we can best structure a loan, if you will, to get them back into the future. And there's a lot of people right now, if they're surviving right now, we can work with them.
The thing that I find amazing as far as investment strategies also, when you look at, there's a particular commercial that's out there from one of the huge investment firms, and it's kind of the animated thing where you see the guy saying, well, look, I don't want to buy a wine vineyard or something.
Right.
Are you finding that there are people that perhaps are having a more common sense approach?
Yes, I think people are really getting back. I think it's just common among society right now. People are kind of getting back to basics, and I think that's true across a variety of different areas of the economy, and certainly the investment and the banking industry are no different from that standpoint. And it's important, given the volatility of the market. I mean, you look at this week specifically, in the stock market has been incredibly volatile, and people want to be able to pick up the phone and understand what's going on.
When you look at, I guess, the whole level of volatility and going back a couple of years ago, I mean, even prior to that, where you had the whole mess with the S&Ls, where you had lots of failures, and you think community banks, I mean, it's always been kind of a tough road to hoe on your own.
Community banks historically, because of, the thing we have to have is capital, and because the capital levels are usually lower in the community banks, it's been tougher to compete. But what we're finding is, if you're doing a good job managing your balance sheet in that community bank, you can grow it very slowly and gradually, and do good credit underwriting. And that means sitting down with the client and find out what they need.
Is it the credit crisis that really caused a lot of the problems, though?
I think it's a combination of things. I think we bankers, we got a little loose with the credit, and also I think that people started thinking they could afford, that the pricing of their houses is going to continue to go up, and so forth and so on. And there was really no end in sight. And then this really jolted it back to what I call the underwriting we used to do back in the 80s.
Same way on your side of it?
Yes. I mean, I think whether it was in the financial area or commodities or otherwise, a lot of investments got overheated. Some would blame the Federal Reserve for keeping rates too low back in the early 2000s. We may be making the same mistake again, potentially, but yeah, I would agree that people are taking a step back and really evaluating what are my needs from a financial investment standpoint, and how do I achieve those goals, and stepping back and reassessing their true needs.
When you look at what has occurred, and that is people talk about the TARP money, we've had a couple of interesting stories here close to Charlotte, Citizen South Bank based out of Gastonia. They took the TARP money, they paid it back in a hurry. But on the other side of the issue of community banking, one of the big legacy banks being Bank of Granite, they didn't fare so well in a lot of the changes.
You're right. What happened is, particularly in the Bank of Granite situation, they were at one time what we call the hallmark of community banks to look at. And like a lot of community banks, they did a lot of real estate lending, probably was a little aggressive, if you will, and just couldn't recover once the collapse hit.
From the standpoint of surviving, how does that happen? I mean, you got to have some solid principles in. I
think one of the things that I'm really encouraged about is we are really getting back to common sense lending, where we sit down with someone and as I've always said, if you don't have some money in it, then probably it's not going to be a good loan. I always look for what their cash equity position is. The banks don't need to be equity partners; they need to be lenders.
From the standpoint of that, cash equity partners, it's sound practices, not only, from the standpoint of people that you lend to, but where you have to police yourself.
That's exactly right. And we have to have controls in place, which we do in our institution. They're always looking at every credit as it goes on, and if it becomes a problem, quickly addressing it.
Is it the same way with investment strategies to avoid the Madoff kinds of scenarios that you speak of?
It is. It's an age-old saying, if it's too good to be true, it probably is. And people it's amazing how often they tend to forget that. And there is this relationship between risk in return. If someone promises you more return, you're inherently taking more risk.
And Tom, I want to end this segment with you before we bring on our special guest, which is I had a banker tell me once. He said, if you can't see it from a community standpoint, you don't want to be able to invest in it. In other words, drive by that house that you're looking at refinancing, before you sign on the dotted line there. That's
exactly right. And my philosophy also is to, people love a yes and respect a no, but they just don't like those lingering maybes. So we try to sit down and give them a yes or a no, or try to make a no a yes.
Okay, all right. Well, we want to move ahead to our special guest here, but before we do that, Chris William will be back in coming weeks, and we have quite an extensive lineup to pass along to you here for some of the people that will be on Carolina Business Review. In coming weeks, we have Dr. Ron Paulus, who is with Mission Health System. Also following that, Rick Elias, who is with Red Ventures, and someone I happen to know, Charlotte Mayor Anthony Fox, who will be filling a lot of people in on some of the happenings and the comings and going as the Queen City gets ready for the Democratic National Convention in 2012. But we want to welcome onto the program someone who is, I guess, one of the better known business faces in the Charlotte community, and you go through the Carolinas, you can't help but see his product. We're talking about Autobell. Chuck Howard. Chuck, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Just going to say, gosh, you hear the banking stories, but you've had some good fortune, even in as much as this recession. You've done some expansion, and you guys seem to be not only on the cutting edge of, I guess, being innovators in some of the things that you guys do, but you're going into how many states now?
Oh, well, we're in Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and now Georgia.
Right, and you've kind of become a regional, I guess, player in terms of, car washing. In fact, I remember coming to Charlotte in the 1980s, and I just want to maybe just kind of, jog your memory, and you're still standing and thriving and surviving. But you remember a franchise called Hot Springs?
Of course, of course. Yeah.
The brushless thing. So what's made it work for you, Chuck?
Well, this is our hometown, and our home office is here, and we're a family business. I learned the business from my father, and my son's in the business now, and we even have grandchildren that are working in the business, so soon it'll be the fourth generation. And I think that the desire to work together and to run the business like a family has been a key to our success.
One of the things I was talking about as far as the whole cutting edge part of it, you guys, and this was before everyone talked about going green, you recycle your water. I mean, how did all that get started?
Well, we've been in the water management business since day one. Water is a key ingredient to what we do, and recycling that water, if we can, just makes sense. The technology has changed tremendously since we started 42 years ago, but we're into recycling more than ever, and it's just a necessary part of what we do.
And one other thing I want to bring up here before the gentlemen jump in because they have their questions as well, which is you all have always, in the last few years, had a strong presence in the Carolina Carousels Parade here, which basically speaks volumes about good corporate citizenship.
Well, we're a big part of this community. We're proud to be here, and we want to participate and give back, and that's just a small thing that we do. My father started that association years ago, and I'm not even sure what year it was, but I think it must be 30 or more years ago.
It's back when Fred Kirby and Calico were riding in the parade.
Absolutely. I still have pictures, and it's just something it's fun to do. It's something that the whole community can enjoy. And, the region that our major part of our car wash locations are right here in the Charlotte area. So it is visible and to all of those folks in the Charlotte metro area. I think it's a great thing to do.
All right, gentlemen, have at it with Mr. Howard here.
Well, I'll ask the first question. I'm curious, when you talk about expansion, what's the process that you go through in terms of evaluating whether you're going to buy or rent a site and go through that expansion, and what's the time frame over which that happens?
It can take a year from the time we get interested in a site until we are washing cars, and that's probably a minimum. It can be longer, 2, 3, or more, and all of that is, or the majority of that is the planning. The actual construction and installation of equipment is a matter of a few months. But we do have a process of examining the demographics, looking at the site characteristics, doing our evaluation and projections, the financial engineering to see if it'll work, negotiating with the landowner for whether it's a lease or whether it's a purchase. So it's quite a process, and it's time consuming, and as you might imagine, you have to have properties that are in the queue all the time. Some make it all the way through and some drop out along the way.
Has the regulatory process gotten more cumbersome in terms of getting approvals from communities?
I think that our particular type of wash is sometimes hurt a little bit by the zoning process. A lot of communities still have zoning that's a little more restrictive. It's a little more intensive type of zoning for our particular type of wash. And yes, that makes it difficult to be in the communities where we need to be. I think a lot of that goes back to outdated thinking. You know, the wheels of change turn slowly, and a lot of the notions go back to maybe 30, 40 years ago when car washes were a different animal.
Sure.
Tom, you want to jump in here?
Yeah, the thing is really is curiosity to me. I talk to so many businesses that have been in a downward trend, and you just seem to be going the other way. What's some of the reasons? I mean, what are some of your economic reasons that you've been so successful and continue to be, even during this time?
Well, I'll go back to our founder, my father, who put our basic system together and our basic philosophy and on how to wash cars and how to put together a site. If you've been to one of our sites, you'll notice they're lean and efficient. There's not a lot of waste as far as real estate and that sort of thing. We're narrowly focused on one service. And I think as the years have gone by, we have developed a system that works, that's documented, and that can be repeated over and over again, and it's easy to teach to our associates.
The other thing, though, is based on the generations in Charlotte and in the Carolinas, and the fact that you all are regional players pretty much dictates the fact that you have a lot of repeat businesses or customers, which is something you really want.
We do have a lot of repeat customers, and we're trying to learn more about that all the time. What is the frequency of a regular customer, and how many occasional customers, and so on. And we're learning about that all the time. But certainly, because of the length of time we've been in the market and the number of people here, our name is well known here. Now, other markets, we have to work hard to establish ourselves, and we're learning about that as well.
Can you talk about, you would think in this type of industry, employee turnover, and finding, constantly replacing employees would be difficult, but reading about your firm, that's not necessarily the case. You know, what have you done to help, keep employees on longer than you might normally think? Most
of our employees are students, and this is our job. The car wash is a great job for a student because it's flexible hours. It's mostly daytime work, no late night work. We can accommodate a class schedule if they can only work a couple days a week, and we encourage that. We want the brightest kids in the neighborhood, and to help that, we have a scholarship program that has become very popular since 2000. I think when it started, we've awarded more than 400 scholarships to employees, some who have applied every year of their college career, and some have even stayed with us after their graduation. So we encourage that, and it's also to change the image, if you will, of our industry. I think that we still have the baggage of, if you can't get a job anywhere else, you can always go to the car wash, and maybe it's, the guy with his hat turned around backwards and maybe not too clean and all that. And so we're working hard to change that image, and part of that is attracting young people to come and work for us. And incidentally, I have heard, I don't know the exact number, but up to 24% of young people from ages 18 to 24 are unemployed. Yeah, that's a much higher rate than the unemployment rate overall.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you this question, that is, how much is it related to service? Simply because every time I've gone to one of your outlets, I've had a good experience. I mean, from the time that, they vacuum the car going into sir, would you like the pina colada fragrance inside of your vehicle there?
We do focus on service, and we focus on time. We feel that in today's world, time is money to most people. And taking care of the family car is a chore that needs to be done. We all enjoy a clean car. We all feel better when our car is clean. But we don't want to spend a lot of time doing it. We want to come in, get that done, and move on. And so we focus on how to take care of that task in a small amount of time, usually 15 minutes or less. And to do that, we've examined every part of that process and boiled it down to a step-by-step that's documented and that's easy to train those individuals that come into work.
Tom, I know you have another question.
I do. Tell me where you are on the larger vehicles, the trucks, the trailers, or is that something that you're thinking about doing in the future, or are you doing it now?
If you're talking about very large vehicles like delivery trucks and tractor trailers, that's somewhat specialized. And I think that there are facilities that do that, and we have a sister company that actually sells those systems to that market. But looking back over the history of the car washing, when we started in the industry, the typical clearance was 70 inches. And, and just for comparison, that has increased as SUVs and pickup trucks have come along. And today our clearance is 96 inches. So we've had to adapt the equipment to the typical passenger vehicle that most people drive. But the very large delivery vehicles is I think, a different market.
Sounds like an issue of fleet management then, or maintenance, you know, when you talk about it.
Yes. Fleet management, people that have large fleets of vehicles need to be concerned about how they clean those vehicles and what it does to the environment. There are a lot of issues there about where the wastewater goes, and we're all aware of that. And there are methods to handle that and to take care of the fleet in the proper way.
What were some of the, I guess, nuances that you had to deal with, because as it related to the recession, simply because you were building during the recession, where a lot of people weren't? I mean, what made you go for it while others scaled back?
Since 2008, we have opened 15 new locations, and so going back to that time, that's about a 30% growth over the bad economic times.
And some consider car washing to be an amenity where you can get out of your driveway with a hose and, you know, but...
Well, there is a large number of people that still consider that the way to wash the car, but our feeling is that going forward, that the car wash is going to be a convenience for people. It's going to be accepted. To accomplish that, it takes more locations, and that's why we continue to grow. It's not enough just to have a location here and there and expect people to travel a long way to get there. They won't do that anymore. People need the services and things that they buy close to home, especially with the high cost of gas nowadays.
We got about a minute left here. What can we expect to see out of you guys?
Well, we expect to continue to grow. We expect to grow our charity car wash program, which I didn't get a chance to talk about, but it's huge.
Hurry.
Charity car wash program is wonderful. We've done it since 1998, and we've helped people raise $4 million, and we do it to create awareness about parking lot runoff. When car washes are washed on a hard surface and the water runs directly into the storm system, that water is untreated, and most people don't know that. So it gives us a chance to talk to groups in a positive way about an alternative for fundraising. Our company is going to continue to grow. We're going to do it sensibly. We have good people that have been with us a long time and good financial direction. And as the economy improves, we'll probably pick up the pace.
And it sounds like you're going to pass it on to some of the other Howards along the way.
There's a couple more generations coming, and I'm very proud of that.
Okay, well, that's going to be a wrap for us on this edition of Carolina Business Review. I want to say thank you to our panelists here. I'm Steve Crump, in tonight for Chris William. Thanks so much for joining us. Have a good weekend.
Major funding for Carolina Business Review provided by Grant Thornton, an international accounting, tax, and business advisory organization dedicated to serving middle market companies. Grant Thornton, a passion for the business of accounting. And by Novant Health, a not-for-profit group of hospitals and physician clinics, ranked as one of our nation's 10 best healthcare systems, caring for patients and communities in North and South Carolina. Major funding also by King & Spalding, an international law firm with over 800 lawyers in 13 offices worldwide, providing legal services to clients in the Carolinas and throughout the world. For more information, visit www.kslaw.com. Additional funding provided by Business North Carolina Magazine. There's a place for those who subscribe to the theory that business doesn't have to be boring. And by Sunoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and provider of packaging services, with more than 300 operations in 35 countries, headquartered in Hartsville since 1899. And by viewers like you. Thank you. You may write us at Carolina Business Review, 3242 Commonwealth Avenue, Charlotte, North Carolina, 28205.